everyone, thanks for joining us here on Mom Squad. I'm Maureen Kyle, and this is a show where we talk all things parenting, the good, the bad, and the scary. In the U.S. alone, roughly 840,000 people are reported missing each year, and the FBI says just under 90% of them are children. We talk to our kids a lot about stranger danger, but the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children estimates stranger abductions are only between 4,000 to 20,000 of those missing. Today, I talked to Special Agent Andy Burke with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who handles missing and exploited children cases. He goes in depth about the true dangers and how you can protect your family. So we as parents always talk about stranger danger with our kids. But is that accurate? Stranger danger, is that what we should be preaching to our children?
So I think what you're getting at is when we talk about warning our kids about potential risks of kidnapping in particular. And realistically, less than 1% of kidnapping incidents nationwide are related to a stranger to the child. So if I were developing a safety plan to talk to my kids, which I have, I would be more focused on talking to them about internet safety rules, about how we communicate with people and in what situations specifically. I've told my kids, and I tell other people, if you're with your parent or another trusted adult, then it's fine to talk to people that we don't know. But when you're in an environment where you're alone and somebody's talking to you, then the other adult should also recognize that that's probably a situation that the child might be uncomfortable with. And your first instinct should be to go get a trusted adult to then continue that conversation or whatever it is. Yeah,
I want to talk about internet in a minute, but first, usually, and correct me if I'm wrong, usually if there is an abuse or a kidnapping situation, is it somebody that is close within the family or close family friend that I've always heard grooms the child?
Yeah, so the overwhelming number of incidents that involve exactly what you say are from somebody who's close to the child. There are a whole host of ways that those people can begin the relationship with the child. It could be a family friend, somebody that they see in person, but more so these days we're seeing that initial connection come through the internet in the form of a game that the child is playing or a social media application that the child has access to. But yes, to answer your question, it usually is somebody that's known to the child. It may not be known in the way that you and I think of knowing somebody. It may be knowing somebody through social media. I would suggest or submit that that's not really knowing somebody, and that might be a discussion to have with your kid.
Well, how would you go about that? You're a father. How do you go about having that discussion specifically about what are appropriate boundaries and when does that delve into dangerous, where it might turn into a kidnapping situation?
So I think that's a discussion that you have to have with your kid over time. Not a single interaction with your child about what is safe and what's unsafe, but to engage your kids in regular conversation about things that you either see on the news or you read or that have happened to their friends at school, that continue that conversation about what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. We set boundaries at my house about where phones go with the kids, that they stay on the first floor and that's where they charge, and they're welcome to use their phones, during normal hours, downstairs and text their friends. But we also have a limit on the number of applications that they can use, what kinds of applications they can use. And it's important as a parent to know what kinds of things are available in every application. And there are a lot of parents, I think, that don't understand that some of the games kids are playing these days have active chat features, not only text, but voice, and they're communicating with people they don't know. So we have a lot of discussion about what is, especially when our kids were younger, about what is to know somebody, right? It's not to just meet them or have a casual conversation on the internet. We know our friends and our neighbors and our family. We don't know people we have one or two discussions with.
Which games and what applications do you think are the most dangerous?
Oh my goodness. I couldn't put a pin in that. The reality is the landscape changes daily. Just go to the App Store on Android or on Apple and look at the number of applications that are out there. We certainly don't have a top 10 worst applications list. It's incumbent on a parent to know what the capabilities, I guess, of every application is. And when you see that they have chat features, again, text or voice, that should raise some red flags about who they might be interacting with.
Who are these people that are getting in the chat? And in my mind, I'm thinking, is this somebody who's overseas? Is this somebody who has a location device and is able to figure out who's playing within the community and within the neighborhood? Or are we seeing more just random across the country?
Well, I think first of all, your child's friends and relatives are in these chats, so I don't want to make it sound like everybody that's in these, social media, on these social media platforms or in these games is a child predator. That is certainly not the case. But it is a very active place for predators to look for victims. And those people are, just as you say, international, they're across the United States, they can be local. And what they're doing more and more, we're seeing a huge trend toward developing victims online, both through kind of these publicly available, easy to access applications, but also on what used to be more difficult to get into, dark web kind of things. They're using these platforms to groom kids, right? To slowly ask questions about where they live and who their friends are and what their pet's name is, and then use that to develop a relationship with the child. This is a big problem with sextortion, right? They make the child feel comfortable. They're often pretending to be somebody who they're not. They might be in a group chat with a bunch of the kid's known friends, and this is a profile that's unknown but sounds like another kid. They say the right things. They've developed enough information about the child or the child's friends to make it seem like maybe they go to a neighboring school. But what I tell my kids is that if you don't know who the person is behind the profile, then it could be anybody. And that's an important message, I think.
And how long have you been covering cases like this and investigating cases?
I've been working violent crime and violent crimes against children in Cleveland for the last 17 years.
Are there any common denominators? I know you said that there's a bunch of different scenarios, but especially lately with internet features and apps, is there a red flag or a common denominator with these predators that you can give parents a warning about?
Well, I think the problem is that these predators are operating in environments where they know the child is essentially alone, right? I don't know how many parents are playing these games with their kids in the same chat groups or are part of the same group chat with their child in any number of the social media apps. So I don't know that there's a red flag when it comes to identifying the perpetrator themselves, but certainly red flags when it comes to a child's behavior, right? A kid that all of a sudden has become withdrawn or has made a massive change in their daily habits, or maybe you're even getting some referral or information from a friend of that child, from their parent or something like that. Those are things that parents should be attuned to. And then to know to start asking the right questions. And it's okay for parents to snoop, a little bit on, especially in younger kids. When we teach a child to drive, we're in the car with that kid for 50 hours, right? That's the state law here to help them learn how to drive. The internet is no different. It is I tell my kids, your access to the internet is the second most dangerous thing you will do while you are living in my household. The first is driving, and the second is this unfiltered access to the rest of the world.
As you've been talking, I mean, as a parent, I'm already starting to feel overwhelmed. That's my major concern, is the internet is ever-changing, so wide-ranging. We give tablets to 2- and 3-year-olds, and sometimes they're better at it than we are because they catch on a lot faster. So how should a parent snoop or be involved? Or is there something that should they be downloading the same app, having the same account? How do they know the ins and outs?
those are all excellent ideas, and it's child dependent, it's family dependent. I would say that there are a lot of applications out there that help you do exactly that, keep tabs on what your child is doing online, but you can also have an open relationship with your kid. And again, in my household, I have the passwords to their phones, and they know that I'm going to check them occasionally. And again, like driving, the more comfortable they become, the more adept at identifying potential pitfalls, the less I have to do that. And as long as you can maintain that open communication with your child, which is difficult with teenagers, the better off you're going to be and the safer your kid is going to be. But I would say, especially starting out, applications that help you track and monitor your child's activity online, checking the physical phone itself, limiting the kind of applications that the child can use. All these phones have native applications for text message, and those are absolutely the safest way for a child to communicate. I've certainly had parents tell me that they need X, Y, or Z application because all of their friends are on that application. There's a safety trade-off to that, and a parent just needs to make those decisions based on their individual family needs and their child.
And I've heard some parents tell me, and some experts also say, that there are some even just simple gaming apps that you would think are safe, but then they have these, secret ways for kids to get around it and either chat or meet people. Do we get a false sense of security sometimes when it's a very popular app or one that we trust is just, it's just a game?
Right. I think that there are ways to use those applications, especially as a child, and still be safe. And it has a lot to do with how they conduct themselves in those environments. And what I would say is that this is a great opportunity as a parent to have these discussions about stranger danger or safety, which is, we don't give personal information out on these platforms ever, right? And I would tell them, in an abundance of caution, even if you think you know who else is in the room or the game that you're playing, maybe it's 8 other players, and you see screen names that you recognize, we still don't give out personal information. A lot of these applications have players or people that are coming and going from the game, at any given moment. And so you could easily find yourself in a sense, I'm just talking to my friends. Next thing you know, you're giving out your street name, the school you go to, your dog's name, and all of those things are weapons that a predator would use against that child, right? To gain their trust, and ultimately be a predator. So I think it's, as a parent, what I would say is we exercise this level of caution when we're operating in that environment, right? We protect our personal information. That's a good life lesson, right? We don't go out there with our social security numbers on our shirts, and that's for a reason, right? We're trying to protect our personal information.
And I'm sure any parent hearing this, in the back of their mind, is saying, will this happen to my child? What are the risks, and how does it get from point A to point B, B being kidnapping or, in some cases, trafficking?
Sure. The risk is small when you consider, all of these applications and the number of kids that are online every day. The risk is absolutely small. But it's important to know that it exists and that there are ways to mitigate that risk. And that's what we're interested in law enforcement, right? We're interested in mitigating as much of a risk as possible and then investigating those cases when they happen, and then prosecuting the offenders. I would say that the way that offenders are contacting kids today is a lot different than the way they were contacting kids, 20, 15 years ago. And we just need to be more vigilant as parents and guardians to those evolving trends and do everything we can to mitigate the risk that way.
As a parent, what are the boundaries that you put on your kids when it comes to using apps, games, and the internet? So
personally, like I mentioned, we have a rule that cell phones and tablets don't go beyond the first floor, so they're used in public spaces. You can certainly have a private conversation, but the phone doesn't go up somewhere where I can't see you using it. We also have controls in place that if they want to download an application, I get a message on my phone that says this person is requesting access. And that gives me a minute to check the application and make sure that, like I said before, that the specifications of the app don't have crazy text and chat features that I'm not aware of. And if they do, then I have a discussion with my child about what the purpose of the application is, and we kind of reiterate the safety rules and the things that I want them to be looking out for. Kids these days can't do anything without a computer, and they need access to technology. I'm not trying to shelter my kids from having access to phones or computers. We just want to help them learn how to use them safely.
Do they use their real name, or do they use a fake name? And sometimes those apps and games want a picture. Do you make sure that you don't have the real information on there?
It's a great question. I would never put my kid's picture online, especially in a gaming application. Again, that's protecting that personal and private information. So to the extent you could use an alias, especially when you're in a game, I think that's a wise idea. Using a child's full first and last name. I think, remember maybe 30 years ago, there was a big, well, don't put your kid's name on their backpack, right? Because then somebody who's driving by could call them by name. It's no different than that in the internet these days. But so to do things that protect your personal information is a life lesson, and this is a great way to start out with that. And you can do that without scaring a child. It's just about being safe.
Yeah. So overall, I mean, again, mine are younger. My oldest is 9. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. And I make sure I'm walking them down the street, and I'm nervous about them riding their bike, or even going out of sight and using a public bathroom. But that's even lesser risk than their internet use.
Absolutely, it's less of a risk. I'm not suggesting that parents go back to the way it was, 4 years ago, where you say goodbye to your kids in the morning and you don't see them until after dark. I think that there is prudence in knowing exactly where your child is at all times, and to be aware of the people that they're with. But there's also a need as a child to have some degree of freedom and learn how to operate in that environment. We don't want to push out kids that get to 18 years old and have never been outside the eye of their parents, right? And parents don't want that. They want to develop a confident kid that has good life skills that, hopefully they can keep themselves safe when they leave the nest. So it's important to develop good habits with the kids. It's important to give them some agency over their own safety. As far as like letting your kid go to the bathroom, I would say every situation is situationally dependent, right? There are a lot of variety in that one question. But on the risk level, you're at a restaurant, your child wants to go to the bathroom by themselves. I think the overwhelming majority of the time, that's a perfectly safe thing to do.
FBI has an app to use to help track kids.
Yes. So not to track kids,
but register your child.
Right, and it's not even a registration. What it is, the FBI Child ID application is a great resource for parents that are in a terrible situation. If you download this application, we have the ability to add as many children as you want on that application. Their photo, their names, identifiers. What I would suggest is that if they're online and they're using applications, that you also have what services they're using, what sites they're going to, and their passwords is a very important thing to keep. But you could put all of that in the Child ID app. Then it's all in one place with an updated photograph of the kid. But more importantly, the application has a couple of checklists. What to do in the first 24 hours after your child has gone missing, what to do in the second 24 hours. And it's a way for somebody who is going to be completely frazzled. If my kid went missing, I would be a mess. But I would have this application to remind me, okay, this is how we focus on what needs to get done right now. Number one, call 911. And then all of the steps below that about how to ensure that my child is being entered into the NCIC FBI system for missing children. There's no waiting period for that. how to ensure that your local law enforcement agency is looping in the FBI, getting our assistance, working with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and kind of a timeline, a step-by-step. These are the things that really should be getting done right now. I just think it's a great resource for a terrible situation that hopefully no parent ever has to use, but they should know that it's out there.
Anything else that we haven't talked about when it comes to any of these cases or situations, or any information that you wish parents knew ahead of time?
I think one issue that we get questions on a lot at the FBI is a conflation of kidnapping and human trafficking. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of misinformation is out there. People seem to think that human traffickers are kidnappers, that they're taking kids out of front yards and off their bicycles. The reality is the two issues are different. They're distinctly different. Generally speaking, a stranger abduction is not somebody who is then trafficking a child. And a human trafficker is not, generally speaking, somebody who's kidnapping children. Human trafficking, the issue itself, especially when we're talking about kids, is a highly tuned predator with a radar for vulnerable children on the margins of our society that are then using master manipulation skills to gain control of that child. That's decidedly different than kidnapping. And I do think that there is some misinformation. Parents think that, well, my child could be a target of human trafficking in the scenario that you described, where they go to the bathroom and somebody's trying to take them to enter them into a life of human trafficking. That's not what that problem looks like. Mm-hmm. That's not the real face of it.
Yeah. Even after our interview, Andy stressed the importance of knowing your child's password for all social media accounts, knowing what type of devices they own and use, and tracking their usage. He says this makes it easier for them to quickly investigate if there's an issue or a crime. Without knowing that information, gaining access could take weeks. So hopefully this gave you some good information and guidance about the threat that's really out there and how you can stay safe. Thanks again for joining us here on Mom Squad. Remember, you can connect with us on our Mom Squad with Maureen Kyle Facebook page. Share your thoughts, connect with other parents. We will see you next time right here on Mom Squad.